Good morning, everyone. My name is David Gomez. I'm coming to you live again from London. This is the Ramphal Institute, and this is the third of our webinar series um, to examine the issue of air pollution in Commonwealth countries and what's being done to combat its harmful health effects. This is part of a program to improve urban air quality funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, Delhi, and the objectives are to build consensus among Commonwealth governments to adopt common objectives to improve air quality in Commonwealth countries as part of a drive for a greener, more sustainable world, and to promote stronger networking within and across India and the Commonwealth, particularly among regional and national agencies operating in cities and urban centers badly affected by respiratory illnesses as a result of poor air quality. These webinars are complemented by a series of policy briefs that are produced on specific topics, usually aligned to the themes of the webinars, such as clean transportation, agricultural air pollution, indoor air pollution. And together, these provide a run-up to the high-level forum that will be held at the end of March, on the 30th and 31st of March, addressing measures and policies to combat air pollution in Commonwealth countries. Following the international forum, the Ramphal Institute will forward a position paper to Commonwealth governments for them to consider ahead of CHOGM 2021, and will also be conducting advocacy around 2026 on the matter. Welcome to all of you in the Commonwealth and around the world, and to our partners, the FCDO, FICCI, and the National Institute of Urban Affairs, NIUA. And a special welcome, of course, to our esteemed panelists joining us from Kenya, from Canada by way of Tobago, and of course from India as well, Delhi. Dr. Alice Kaudia is the coordinating co-chair of Africa Integrated Assessment of Air Pollution and Climate Change, a partnership project between UNEP, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, Stockholm Environment Institute, and the African Union. She is the former global co-chair of Climate and Clean Air Coalition, former board member of the World Resources Forum, served as former co-chair of Global Green Growth Knowledge Platform, and is the former first environment minister in Kenya, and was also technical advisor on forestry curriculum and training development and community-based natural resources management approaches. I believe that was in Zambia. Also with us today is Mark Burkhoff, co-founder and chief commercial officer for Alchemy Renewables LLC, a US Caribbean-based project development and holding company specializing in climate resilient, protected agricultural and integrated renewable energy systems in the Caribbean and global island states. Ralph has over 40 years of experience working with multinational clients and supporting their expansion into global markets. He's originally from Toronto, Canada, and has focused almost exclusively on the Caribbean and Latin American market for the past 25 years. And for the past 10 years, he has made the Caribbean island of Tobago his home. And he tells us it's a very beautiful place. We'll have to go visit to see. And finally, Mr. Kolluru Krishan is chairman of FICCI Climate Change Committee and member of FICCI Working Group on Curbing Stubble Burning. And he's also a member of the executive committee of Karnataka State Bioenergy Development Board. Krishan is also chairman of CVC India Infrastructure PVT Limited and has over 30 years experience in infrastructure, power, bioenergy, and in the oil and gas sectors. He has held top management positions in global energy majors and served as founder chairman of multiple clean tech companies. Welcome to all of our speakers and welcome all of you again. But first, here's my brief take. I believe that as citizens of the Commonwealth, we're all used to biomass burning in the post-harvest season for fertilization. If you are from a sugar-producing country, like in the Caribbean, one of the islands, this certainly would have been a part of your experience, and it probably still is and marks an important part of the annual cycle of life. In Barbados, this is still celebrated by the famous Crop Over Festival. In India, crop burning includes rice residue burning as well, particularly in November and early December in the breadbasket region of Northwest India. Increased mechanization has transformed rice production and agricultural production in India and has led to more residue burning. According to Yale Environment, the burning of crop residue during the fall and winter months is the major cause of the dangerously high levels of air pollution suffered in Delhi during that period, and which affects tens of millions of people, including women and all the kids going to school. The emissions from crop burning is so high, it rivals fossil fuel emissions during the peak summer months. I found that very interesting because I always thought it was from vehicular emissions. One study found that Delhi is affected by crop burning on farms located as far away as 125 miles. It's picked up in the winds and blown over to Delhi. So it can't be that you're no anymore saying that the channel of emission and pollution is coming from the cities to the rural areas. As a matter of fact, this overturns the notion that emission flux between the cities and rural areas is mainly one way. India has enacted laws to banning the practice, but it continues widely, though new technologies such as what's called a happy seeder are being rolled out, and with some successes. Some studies suggest that in districts where these practices are widespread, there is a threefold increase in acute respiratory illnesses, pointing to a need to transition more rapidly to no-burn agricultural system or to eco-friendly agricultural systems. And Ralph is going to tell us a whole world about that today. In the United Kingdom, crop burning isn't practiced widely or on a large scale, if at all. However, intensive cattle farming is, and cattle emit methane, which has a major impact on greenhouse gas emissions. The average cow is estimated to release between 70 and 120 kilograms of methane per year. And the livestock industry is responsible for 14.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. In Australia, 10% of greenhouse gas emissions are from livestock. And Down to Earth, a media program in Delhi and in India, argues that with one of the largest cattle populations in the world, India needs to address its cattle methane footprint. And a study published in 2020 found that livestock in India account for as much of all, as 63% of all agricultural emissions. The American Journal of Respiratory Medicine found that large farm environments are associated with increased risk of obstructive airway diseases. And not only humans are affected, but they're finding that the animals in those farms are now affected. The cows, the pigs, the chicken are all being found with illnesses in the respiratory tract and lung diseases. Stagnant levels of ammonia emissions in European countries, including the United Kingdom, is also an issue. And a recent study found that ammonia emissions have only experienced moderate reductions over the last 30 years. So while that sector has not increased in terms of emissions, the fact that it has remained stagnant is still an issue. In today's Ramphal virtual roundtable, our panelists will share their views on agricultural air pollution. What is agricultural air pollution and what are its causes? Is it only from farting cows? Or is this limited to rural areas and urban centers equally and affected by biomass burning? What are Commonwealth countries doing to counter agricultural air pollution? What are the solutions? Less consumption of meat, as some people tend to propose, mechanization, or just changes in policy? Or is it that we require changes to cultural practices as well? We will address these questions and more today. But first, let me turn to Dr. Kaudia and ask her, Dr. Kaudia, in Kenya, I know that biomass burning is an issue. What is the situation there and what's being done about it?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to share.
I don't think your audio is on, Dr. Kaudia, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I know that biomass burning is...
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, if you can hear me, that's fine. Yes, in Kenya, like in most African countries, biomass burning is a practice that has been there traditionally, particularly for opening up new land for agriculture, settlement, and also for ensuring that when cultivation is being done, harmful insects, reptiles are not there, because most of these farmers, especially small-scale farmers, are not using mechanized agriculture. So the situation is such that air pollution from agriculture continues. And in my opinion, it's mainly because other than being a standard practice, farmers are also not informed of the harmful impacts of air pollution on their health, on the environment, and what they can do about it. However, Kenya has got an air quality regulation of 2014, which in general terms contributes to...
Amy Carson's leaving, or leaving on the 24th there. What about Amy Crawford? Did I hear you say she was leaving as well?
Hello?
That's okay. No, I just want to make sure. I couldn't remember.
Okay. Maybe I can be heard better now. So as I was saying, Kenya has got air quality regulations of 2014, and this helps in terms of controlling air pollution in general terms, but not with specific focus in our agricultural systems. On the other hand, our constitution provides that we enjoy a clean and healthy environment. And based on that broad statement and constitutional provision, we are also able to address issues of air pollution. But from the agricultural sector, we still have a lot to do. And on that account, and given the situation in Africa in general, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, at which I'm serving as a senior advisor at the moment, in partnership with UNEP, the African Union, and Stockholm Environment Institute, we are undertaking an integrated assessment on climate change, air pollution, and sustainable development in Africa. This is just one of the assessments. Previously, there's been a global assessment, a Latin America assessment, and an Asia assessment. And during this assessment, there will be modeling of emissions from various sectors, and agriculture is included. Of course, other sectors are waste, industry, transport, and other sectors that have been identified by countries as key in their climate change action response. We have preliminary results now, and we shall be sharing that through a publication, which we call Summary for Policymakers at COP26. That is our target. And it will indicate the trends in emissions, sources, and the possible policy actions that can be taken by Africa. Hello?
Dr. Kadia, thank you very much for that. Sorry, I'm having a bit of technical difficulties here on my end. Ralph, I know that in the Caribbean, you've been pushing to get more people adopting more eco-friendly systems. Tell us about what you're doing there and about how the programs you're putting in place can help to reduce agricultural air pollution. And I think you wanted to use a couple of your slides, right, Ralph? So I'll ask Noemi if you can upload us.
Yeah, if you want to just show them very quickly, I'll just touch on some of the main contributors. And obviously, the Caribbean, I'll just carry on while you're doing that, David, but the Caribbean is made up of an archipelago of many different islands, most of which are participating in the Paris Climate Agreement and sign on. But as you can see, the major emission sources across most of our islands are tourism, automotive emissions, and we get a lot of mosquito fogging. But the number one contributor is the diesel generation plants. Unfortunately, most Caribbean islands are still generating their electricity from diesel generation. I'd say it's probably about 80 to 85% of all the islands here. So that is a major contributor. And in the next slide, you'll see some of the agricultural emission sources. Obviously, we've talked about biomass burning. And can you move to the next slide, Dave?
Yeah. It's Naomi controlling. So Naomi, can you go to slide 2?
We obviously have biomass, burning, not just on farms, but actually in homes. People burn all of their dried biomass in their backyards. It's a common practice, a cultural practice. And I don't think, you know, here in the Caribbean, because of the the fact that we're in the islands and we have this prevailing trade wind blowing across us all the time, you know, everything blows from east to west. And so, you know, all the smoke goes offshore and it disappears, and we don't really have any impact. Obviously, those emissions are not disappearing. They're going into the climate, but you know, it's when they're blown offshore, it's you know, it's gone. And I don't think islanders tend to think about it too much that way. It's just an issue. What we're doing, obviously, on the agricultural side is moving into protected agriculture, greenhouse farming, which is much more energy efficient. And certainly, I wanted to show the next slide, because one of the big impacts that we have here is not just biomass burning, but we have a lot of pesticide and herbicide use, and commercial farms that are spraying constantly. And a lot of that pesticide and herbicide spray tends to drift across into neighborhoods and other farms, and affecting, you know, crop production at the other farms. So our technologies are built around greenhouse farming, organic farming. We don't use any pesticides or herbicides. And at the back end of that, what we intend to introduce is biomass processing through anaerobic digestion, and then processing that organic material into a syngas product, which can then be utilized in different forms as a fuel source and a fertilizer source. So you know, what we're doing here in this region is introducing some of the new technologies to reduce emissions considerably. This slide just shows some of our greenhouse technology and our hydroponic system. So in this type of farming, we are basically eliminating all airborne particulates and emissions, and we're recycling water. It's very efficient. So that's what we're doing on the agricultural side. Our company is also involved in the energy sector, primarily in the geothermal sector, and you know, obviously trying to reduce the diesel generation of electricity in the region.
Excellent, Ralph. Thanks very much for that. Sorry, we're having a bit of difficulties in switching through the slides. But thanks. I mean, I think hydroponics holds a lot of promise, and I know that across the Caribbean and other countries that's being looked at increasingly. Mr. Krishan, let me turn to you now. You're doing a lot of work in India, I believe in Delhi, in biorefineries. What are biorefineries? Tell us a bit more about that and about what you're doing there to help reduce air pollution from your agricultural sector. So I think Mr. Krishan has a bit of challenge joining us today. He was on earlier, and we'll wait for him to come back to us. Ralph, let me come back to you and tell us a bit more about what you're doing in the area of geothermal energies as a measure for shifting the use of biofuels or petroleum fuels in agriculture.
David, before I start, I think Mr. Krishan is back. He was just muted. Yeah, let's let him speak.
Yeah, so basically what I was going to say is that, you know, just to start historically about the aspect of utilization of agricultural residues, you know, India produces about 800 million tons of food every year. So it obviously generates, we have 141 million hectares of arable land. We have about 200 million hectares of gross crop land.
Wow.
So obviously it generates a huge amount of agricultural residues. Now, a portion of this agricultural residues is used as dry fodder for our 300 million cows and buffaloes. But there is a fairly significant amount which is either used very inefficiently or being burnt on the fields. Currently, the focus is on what is being burnt in the fields, which is about 140 million dry tons, which is quite a humongous amount. So the most logical first step, because India has a very strong historical background with biomass boilers, starting with bagasse, etc. India is the largest sugar producer of the world. We may be second largest in terms of cane, but unlike Brazil, we don't really use the sugar cane for ethanol straight away. So we are the largest producer of cane, and therefore we have a lot of bagasse. So the first phase was to burn biomass in boilers, including agricultural residues. There were challenges because it has higher alkalis, there's chlorine. These have been addressed. But in recent years, what has happened is that, utilizing these kind of special design biomass boilers, we need tariffs which are of the order of 8 rupees, let me say ballpark, 11 US cents a kilowatt hour. And solar and wind are at about 2.5 US cents. That means 25% that of biomass power. So it becomes more challenging to get people to accept a high price of biomass power. The effort, therefore, right now is to really treat this for advanced biofuels. And frankly, the first step, which is the technology which is commercialized all over the world, is biogas and bio-CNG. Whereas when you talk of cellulosic ethanol, when you talk of pyrolysis, when you talk of potential for biomethanol, these are things, or even drop-in fuels, these are technologies for the future. But what is really commercialized today is utilizing agricultural residues, co-digesting with manure to produce biogas, separate the CO2, and you get bio-CNG, which can have a wide range of applications to replace either CNG or LPG. So that is a major thrust. The second major thrust is to have cellulosic ethanol, and also looking at the context of biohydrogen. Now, the other major issue for us in India is this 200 million cows and 100 million buffaloes. Though only 40% are in milching at any time because of the holy cow. So there's a whole issue of how to manage cow manure. So a lot of effort is being made on manure management system. I have been for 5 years the founder chairman of the Green Job Skills Council, which is a Government of India and industry initiative. And we've done a lot of efforts on how to do capacity building, where the agricultural residues and manure can be collected by local green entrepreneurs. Because at the end of the day, you can't expect small farmers who own, less than a hectare of land to really collect agricultural residues. Or even, we have 70 million farm households which have cows. So you can't expect each of these small households to collect manure and transport it. So we're trying to develop green entrepreneurs for the supply chain. We're trying to see as to how there can be some financing mechanisms for it. And then it gets into an aggregation point, which in the case of agricultural residues would be biomass depots, where there would be the first pre-processing of cleaning and baling. And then the biomass bale can go for multiple applications. The simplest application, obviously, is a biomass boiler, proven. The second is to go to a digester to make biogas. And the third would be other advanced biofuels. But a very important element out here is that particularly when we do biochemical treatment, we get very good, effluent from which if you separate the solids, it's excellent in humus, has all the micronutrients, and has some major nutrients. So we're trying to link this up with horticulture. We're trying to link this up with the cultivation of hybrid silage crops so that we can improve the quality of cattle feed, which would increase milk yield, which would also try to reduce the ammonia emissions. So these are all the things that are being right now worked upon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Krishan. Dr. Kharja, let me come to you because I wanted to find out what is the mix of challenges that you have in the agricultural sector in Kenya? Is it that you also have large cattle herds that you're trying to deal with, and then large agricultural production? I know in some of the, we were talking just about this, bantering about this earlier, about the Maasai, they are cattle herders themselves. How do you manage that process there, and what are the challenges you're faced with agricultural year production pollution. Sorry, in Kenya, people tend to think that it's only biomass burning, but as we've just heard from Mr. Krishan, it's also all the ammonia and methane that's produced from that sector. I think your audio is off, Dr. Claudia, sorry.
Yeah, we tend to put the audio off so that we don't create background noise. Now, as I was saying, Kenya is 80% classified as arid and semi-arid land, which means that open grazing livestock system is very, very important to our economy. At the same time, in the high potential areas, intensive agriculture is practiced, and therefore application of inorganic fertilizers and so on. And these are by smallholders who form the majority of farmers. So one of the challenges that we have really is also on manure management. And I do remember in my earlier career in the 1982 period, we introduced biogas digesters, and I was just, feeling the similarity between India and Kenya in terms of technology. At the time, it was very rudimentary. It was just a fixed dome biodigester. And the slurry was used for as organic manure in crop fields. This practice still continues, and the government has invested a lot in biodigesters to manage the manure system. There's also a lot of promotion of better quality feed and forage so that digestion by livestock can be managed to reduce the burping that emits methane. Some of the challenges that we have is that farmers don't clearly understand the relationship between their agricultural production practices and air pollution, because this has not been included in our public campaigns strongly. That is one challenge with regards to managing air pollution in agriculture sector. The other is that soils have been heavily depleted, and there's a lot of dependence in organic fertilizer, which is also another major source of pollution. The agricultural value chains are weak in the sense that there's a lot of wastage in the fields. Post-harvest handling is poor. And indeed, up to now, many farmers still depend on burning agricultural residues right in the field post-harvesting, so that for them, it increases soil fertility, and it also opens up the land for the next season, because we no longer are able to follow the farms. The cropping is very consecutive season after season. So agricultural intensification is presenting a challenge, and we really need to see what to do about reducing pollution from the agricultural system.
Yeah, Dr. Claudia raised a couple of important points that I think Ralph just bursting to go on those things about the use of the heavy uses of chemical fertilizers and the practices now with fertilization, because it's been a big problem in the Caribbean and continues to be. Ralph, we had a discussion about this last week or a week and a half ago about the issues there. You want to tell us what the realities are, what are Caribbean countries faced with, literally?
Yes, well, we have a lot of risks in agriculture here, from hurricane threat to flooding to drought. But one of our biggest issues is pestilence. Not just insect-based pestilence, but we have things like monkeys that are coming in and stealing crop. But over the years, and there was news out of Guadeloupe and Martinique, the French islands have been using, farmers across the region have been using some very harmful pesticides and herbicides. Brands that are actually banned in many parts of the world are still being used here. And, these are dangerous for human consumption. They kill small animals. They've depleted the soil nutrition for decades, to the point where it's these chemicals are now in the soil, whether you add further problems, and now we're getting runoff into the seas, and all of these chemicals are running off into the seas. So, and affecting now what we're moving into the blue economy here. So, everything is connected, obviously, in biology, and we need to control these agents. We need to ban them. The problem is that we have partners that farm in some of the islands, and this isn't just the Caribbean. This is all, small island states around the world. They all have the same issues. They have tried organic pesticides and herbicides, but they're just not strong enough yet. So they have a very poor choice to make to continue using chemical-based control agents or to lose a lot of crop production. So obviously, protected agriculture, what we're introducing, and in certain crop categories, is a wholesale solution because we don't really use any herbicides and pesticides. But listening to Mr. Krishan and Dr. Claudia, one of the issues that we have in small island development states is that they're small. We don't have the volume of India or Kenya in terms of biomass or energy production to attract investment in these solution sets. Collectively, as a whole, the region, it could be made attractive, but on an island per island basis, our numbers are tiny. So this is a big problem, is trying to attract investment to bring in some of these technology solutions here, and that's an issue with all small island development states.
Yeah, Ralph, you're very right. I mean, I've seen governments scratch their head over how to get around this in these small islands. Mr. Krishna, you talked about the biomass energy and stuff, but I know in India they've one of the solutions they've put in place is mechanization in these agricultural areas, and it seemed that instead of resolving the issue, mechanization actually created a bigger issue, because when they're harvesting with these mechanized tractors, you don't have the same ability to pull the crops all the way from the root. And to get around that now, a lot of the farmers, especially ones who have smaller farm scales, actually burn the crop, and so it's like the roots that are left there, it's expanded. Do you think that mechanization is a solution to this issue, or are there other challenges as that must be overcome, as Dr. Claudia was saying?
It was a challenge, if I may say so, till about 2 decades ago. See, basically what happened is that when in 1960, India had a very major famine, and we had this necessity for the United States to ship grain in India, etc. So the Green Revolution was really implemented in a very major way by Dr. Norman Borlaug and Dr. Swaminathan in India. So that led to high use of urea, utilization of groundwater irrigation, and mechanization. So in this aspect, as you say, of mechanization, what happens is when you use a combined harvester, in case of wheat, people tend to collect the wheat because it's a good animal feed. Right. But in case of rice or paddy, it's not worth it. But in the last 15, 20 years, large companies, John Deere, CNN, New Holland, now actually CNN rules the roost. They have got 4 factories in India. So they have customized machinery for baling agricultural residues in small farms as small as half an hectare. So I think the mechanization of harvesting, which also, let me say, it's kind of inevitable. I had mentioned in a kind of mail with you that we have about 140 million households, and 700 million people engaged with this. But children don't want to do farming. The children don't want to do manual farming. So I think it's inevitable that we have to have some kind of green economy kind of a thing. So I don't think the mechanization which results in agricultural residue is an issue. We also need the kind of mechanization to collect the residue. We need the mechanization to clean and first level processing of some densification in the form of a bale, and then a whole lot of biotechnologies. Now, just to take a point that Ralph made, as Karnataka State Bioenergy Development Board, we have done a lot of work on tree-based oil seeds, non-edible, The idea is not to use any edible oils for biodiesel, but non-edible. And we got some excellent results. And also developed a model of agroforestry, which has been vetted by ICRAF. So the idea is to have your normal food crop as agriculture, but you have these tree-based oil seeds. Of course, the tree-based oil seed will take about 6-7 years to start yielding. But the tree-based oil seeds, apart from giving oil, the de-oil cake has excellent pesticidal value. It has very good, soil fertilization value. So in a slightly medium to long-term perspective, I think agroforestry with tree-based oil seeds, which can even work in a, Caribbean island, So that's also one of the thoughts which, as a Commonwealth, if we're trying to develop some kind of best practices, could be considered.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. We've heard other people put forward similar proposals to say that they need to move in that direction. And we've heard, as Ralph was saying earlier, talk about moving to organic. But you find that when people who operate, at least the smaller farmers are operating small farms, for them, organic means using manure from the cows. So in fact, they're actually contributing to the process. Dr. Kaudia, outside of Kenya, what's happening in the African region? Is agricultural air pollution or emissions from the agricultural sector a major issue in other African countries as well? I know you've worked across the region. How do cultural practices contribute to the problem?
Yes, in Africa in general, pollution from agriculture is a major problem. So any example that we give about Kenya is quite similar. And you find that at the continental level, the African Union is promoting agroecological agriculture so that African countries can go take up ecologically sustainable agricultural practices. And I think when we talk big words in conferences, we write good statements, but in my experience, it's better to simplify these into actions that can actually be taken up by farmers. Simple things like crop rotation, minimum tillage, mulching, in organic agriculture. As you say, farmers use manure to fertilize their crops, and that contributes to emissions. But however, the same manure pushed through anaerobic digestion gives us a slurry that is more environment friendly and can be used, So I think a lot we have to do is to ensure that farmers, especially small scale farmers in the rural areas and increasingly in urban areas, urban agriculture is intensifying in most of our cities. And we need to support these urban small scale farmers and rural farmers to take up ecologically sustainable agriculture. And in my view, that then goes up to the policy level of fair trade and ensuring that organic food crops are well priced so that they balance off the yield losses that organic farmers experience when compared to farmers who are using synthetic fertilizer. So across Africa, we see the movement whereby countries through the African Union are being encouraged to promote green economy, circular economy, and agroecological practices.
Yes, I do agree. I mean, I think in places like in London and other cities in the UK, you see everybody having their little small plots of land that they go to farm. And with the lockdown, a lot of people were taking up and starting to plant their own little farms. So, I mean, I think...
In fact, Ralph, if you'll allow me, I like that you have made reference to the lockdown. That is something that we should not forget. It has brought a very interesting new experience in Kenya, where most people who are laid off from their formal jobs reverted to agriculture because of the duality of our settlement. You see, in Africa, we are in town, you are in the city, but the city is not really your home. The city is where you make money, you labor, and then that money is transferred to the village. And it's in the village where you have your real home. So when most people are laid off and they can't afford rents and they have got no income, they are shifted to the rural. And therefore, I would say there was urban-driven agricultural expansion. Consequently, you find that in the peri-urban suburbs of a city like Nairobi, then most of these former executives turned out to be grocery operators in their high-end vehicles. So you find that by the roadside now in Nairobi, you find, very expensive vehicles parked and the boot is open. So boot groceries is a trade mechanism that has come up, and everybody now is in the retail sector of food crops. And as more and more people are confined at home and therefore consumption has gone up, demand for food has increased and agricultural intensification is increasing. And therefore, we really need to keep an eye on emission and air pollution from agriculture sector, because it is intensifying as a result of COVID-19, as a result of shift to the rural, as a result of, the lucky few who are still in employment are also having dietary shifts to, and organic foods now, even in our high-end retail supermarkets, you'll find shelves which are labeled organic and they attract quite a number of customers, and then the others which are produced by standard agricultural practices.
Mr. Krishan, let me come to you. Is there a difference between producing organically and inorganic in terms of the impact on air pollution and climate change? Because for me as a consumer, if I see organic, I automatically think, oh, maybe no fertilizers were used. But is that really the case? I'm asking from a perspective of the impact on air pollution and other forms of pollution. What's the difference there, and how do you?
So, this is a very important question. And I have been addressing this thing for about 2 decades. So the important thing is we do not try to push our farmers to declare their farms as organic farms, because the whole process of getting your farm declared as an organic farm and then getting it, there's a whole cost. We are trying to encourage a pesticide-free vegetable, net house, utilize compost. Alice made a very important point about the value of, treating manure, etc., anaerobically rather than aerobically. Therefore, if we could make it go through a digester, we have actually now in India found that the household or village community biogas plants are not very efficient because there's not enough people to maintain it. So we're trying to go to the industrial scale. We've actually got a very ambitious program of 15 million tons bio-CNG from farm waste. Now that will produce about 30 million tons of compost. Now, what we are trying to see is also trying to get this kind of tree-based oil seeds, utilizing, again, an organic pesticide, blending it, but not categorizing a product as organic, because the whole cost of an organic product is too high. But if we say pesticide-free net houses, utilizing compost, it makes economic sense.
It makes a big difference. Ralph, we have a question here that says it's very interesting to hear speakers mention the role of soil. Isn't soil the heart of all ecosystems? How can we improve the soil and keep pollution down? I know you're the aquaponics man, so I'm posing that to you. Tell us water versus soil.
Yeah, I mean, again, our solutions are based on our conditions. We quite frankly, we don't have a lot of arable soil here. The geology of the region is very diverse. We have coral-based islands. We have volcanic islands with very high mountains. So, on those volcanic islands, we have some fertile valleys. On the coral islands, we have very, very little arable soil. So, this is the reason why the food system is so very much under pressure here. We grow, and when I'm talking about agriculture here, we're talking about crop, we're talking about livestock, dairy, poultry, very limited agricultural production. In some islands, as little as 3 or 4% of the local food demand is grown locally, and the rest of it is imported. And the reason for that is the lack of arable land. So, you know, the whole concept of bringing in protected agriculture is that we do not require arable land to grow food. We, in fact, we don't use arable land at all. We don't want to take away the limited arable land. So we use scrubland, and we build our greenhouses there because it's 100% hydroponic production. And this is part of sort of the solution package for us, and certainly for all small island states. But the limited amount of soil that is there, as I've already alluded to, you know, it is being decimated by various chemical pesticides. And, you know, one day we need to come up with a organic solution that can control our pestilence problem in the Caribbean, which is very diverse and very different from other parts of the world, very hostile. But I do like what Dr. Kadia mentioned, and we've seen a lot of this here. As you know, the Caribbean region, you know, their GDP is mainly tourism based. So since tourism shut down, you know, food has become a critical resource for everybody. And, you know, home gardening and small plot farming has increased substantially. To be quite honest, I feel very fortunate to be in the food production business over the last year, because it has only accelerated what we are doing, because it's intensified the focus. And we're seeing that, you know, across the islands where families are starting gardens in their backyards. We're seeing more micro food production that needs to increase and continue beyond the pandemic, I think. So as Dr. Kadia says, you know, there are a lot of big words talked at these conferences. We need to basically boil it down to sort of micro solutions. For our problems, we need to look at irrigation and water supply and water production systems more intensely. You know, water is a very valuable resource here, and that's one area that we could really improve upon.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. Dr. Kadia, there's a question here for you. It says, this is from Desmond, one of our youth Commonwealth youth leaders. I'm wondering why in most African countries fertilizer subsidies seem to be the popular government support to farmers, yet there's really no education on how to apply them. Apart from pollution, over application destroys soil biodiversity, and related to that earlier, Saqib had said, but doesn't changes in the soil also affect the behavior of plants and what comes out of that? That's directed to Dr. Kadia.
Thank you very much. I truly agree with that question. It's very important that indeed most of our governments promote inorganic fertilizer, and we don't have strong programs for educating our farmers, especially the rural small-scale farmers, on how to apply, when to apply CNN, DAP, NPK. They're all branded, but farmers will buy the wrong fertilizer for the wrong application and over-apply. Nonetheless, I think when it comes to reduction of food supply and the concern for food security in a country, the political economy logic will be that let us bring in fertilizers so that we can enhance productivity of our soils. But as rightfully said, that over-application or under-application does affect the soil physics and the soil chemistry, so that eventually we find that our soils, especially soil biodiversity, the small microbes that are in the soil that are really, really essential for the uptake of these nutrients by plants, are killed. And when they are killed, it may not sometimes matter how much application we are doing, because the nutrients can be in the soil, but the uptake by plants can be curtailed. So we need to have a strong education among farmers. And indeed, there are a number of extension service providers who are now taking this up with the technology which is there on instant soil quality analysis. You know, they auger on the ground and you see the reading to know the soil properties, nutrient properties, and that is helping. But we will continue with this trend of fertilizer importation because it hinges on policy and governance systems and the need to take quick action to address food insecurity, which is seasonal, predictable, persistent, but we seem not to be able to plan ahead to avoid it.
So true. Mr. Krishna, you had your hand up just now, or you wanted to add to that?
Yes, because I fully agree. I'll only say also, once a politician introduces a subsidy and wins the confidence of the rural community, it's very, very difficult to withdraw subsidies. So we do have this as a very major issue in India of the subsidy for urea, the subsidy for irrigation water. So for irrigation water, what is being done, and which for Ralph, I don't know whether it'll work in the Caribbean islands, is they're making a very, very major push for solar irrigation pump sets. And as Skills Council of Green Jobs, we've actually done training in 29 African countries in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish, on solar rooftops, solar irrigation pump sets, things like that. But fertilizer subsidy, it's a tough call. It's a tough call for any politician to withdraw it, once introduced.
I have a question here on the WhatsApp. It says, what priorities should Commonwealth governments adopt which might reduce agricultural air pollution? Or is it that they should just recognize how significant a factor this is, or an issue this is for Commonwealth countries? To any of the panelists. Ralph, perhaps you could take that one, or start with that.
Well, there's a lot of protest against current practices in pesticide spraying. I think first of all, let's ban pesticides and herbicides that are banned in other countries already. Right? We actually have departments of agriculture selling dangerous pesticides to local farmers that have been banned in other countries. Right? So there's first order business. Let's just ban all very dangerous pesticides and herbicides, chemical based. Similarly, we have mosquito fogging, which is, very pervasive. When you hear the fogger coming down the road, you've got to close all your windows and shut everything down. You don't want to breathe this stuff. So, I think some policy change could be made in that regard. Burning of biomass, you can make a policy change, but you have to offer a solution first. So, we need to have a technology brought in to centralize a biomass solution, like Dr. Krishan mentioned, whether it's a centralized biomass processing plant on the island, so that all farmers know that they can collect their biomass and to just, bring it into a central depository to get rid of. Then you can make the burning of biomass illegal, and right now, and obviously we don't want it just dumped. So those are just a few points from the island's perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. Mr. Krishna, any thoughts on that
Yes.
question?
We have under BRICS an energy and green economy working group, and which I happen to chair. And last year, actually, under the Green Economy Awards, the award went to low water intensity, low chemical fertilizer, rice cultivation. Now, the New Development Bank actually has funds, unlike the Green Climate Fund. It has $22 billion funds. And one of the things that has been agreed when we had under the South African presidency, is that under BRICS, New Development Bank can fund entire Africa, not limited to South Africa. So I think if we could try to, under this Commonwealth scheme, try to work out some, as Alice and Ralph said, some very micro level modular interventions, which can be adopted in villages, which can be adopted in cluster of villages, and try to put it to, and one of the things for New Development Bank is that sustainability is a very key criteria. Sustainability is as important as IRR. So perhaps we need to try and see as to how we can bring in this kind of things where we combine sustainable energy, sustainable farming, and bring in, the green economy under, actually the term I had used is the farm-based bioeconomy. So just a thought, which we can detail later.
Bioeconomy. Dr. Kaudia, farm-based bioeconomy.
A very good concept, which is already being promoted. And I like Mr. Krishna's intervention. But in my view, the Commonwealth countries will not have one line. I think we will not all move green economy, bioeconomy. As I said, big words, we need to break them down to what actually it means in practical terms, in terms of what should a farmer do. In Kenya, I found something very interesting happening, and it can happen in the Commonwealth countries too, because we are one of them. Constitutional provisions on the rights of the citizens to a clean and a healthy environment, right to food. We have rights to food in our constitution. And I think having youth engaged in agriculture is very important, because when they are, as a small and medium-time entrepreneurs, they can be able to transform our agricultural systems to cleaner systems through technology, because they're tech savvy. And I think a multiple-pronged approach where you have a policy, a legal provision in terms of a constitutional right to food, to clean environment, to health, all bundled together to enable us to undertake public education. People need to be aware of what their actions really mean to their own health and to the health of their environment and to the health of the future generations. And I think the citizen science approach, where universities come to work with local people. I like Mr. Krishna's reference to the village. I am a village movement person. And I think when you work in those smaller groups of a village that clearly understands its environmental challenges, agricultural challenges, and so on, and we package information from the big conferences in smaller information units so that they clearly understand and practice, that can be very important. We have in Kenya the climate smart agriculture that responds to climate mitigation and adaptation measures that is being promoted among communities, and these two can help. So I think we have solutions in our hands. We just get down to the business of getting farmers, the youth, women, and everybody to take action.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we're seeing a movement now towards people are becoming more conscious of what needs to be done. But in the youth consultation we had just this Monday, I believe, and Desmond is here. Desmond can tell you, less than 1% of youth are talking about air pollution and climate issues. And the point that they raised, the 2 points that they raised were crucial ones. They were like, well, youth don't see themselves as contributing to air pollution issues, irrespective of what their practices are. So whether or not they're riding in these air polluting vans or their behaviors. But I think the more important point there was that the governments have not prioritized, or Commonwealth governments have not prioritized these issues sufficiently. And even where they have prioritized these issues, governments do not see youth as part of the solution. So how is it that you can make youth a part of this? I mean, it was a very, very enlightening intervention that came forward from that. I mean, Dr. Kaudia, I want to come back to you. You talked about this climate smart agriculture, and I think that has some potential for engaging women, children, vulnerable groups, or women and vulnerable groups, and being of benefit to people in urban areas, urban poor, because it's not so much that the rural poor are the ones who suffer. There's millions and millions in India and across Africa of urban poor who also suffer. How can they perhaps use climate smart agriculture to help redress the issues of air pollution, climate change, and provide for themselves?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll link this to the concern that the youth raised, that they are not engaged, and so are the urban poor, and so are the women who are poor in the villages. And I think in the climate smart agriculture, other than training and building capacity of stakeholders on how to operationalize that concept, we need to have finance at the table, funding and financing these agricultural programs. And what I have seen now working fairly well is on ensuring we have earmarked funds, funding designed to target specific groups like the youth in agroecologically sustainable agriculture, the women. And when these funds are availed, we conceptualize agriculture as a value chain so that we see who is best placed in the production system, in the value addition, in the transport, in the branding and labeling, in the marketing. And the key thing is to link producers to the market. You can produce and the youth can be engaged, but if they don't have a market, the food crops will not move, okay? Interregional trade, which enables movement of people and food from one country to another. Like, for example, we now have the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, which should enable movement of food so that there's no deficit of food in any part of Africa, you know? And I think, for me, I have a lot of hope in the youth because of their agility and ability to take on new ideas much, much faster than people of my age group. They are the people we have to bank on, but we must enable them through targeted policy for the youth in agriculture, targeted policy on youth entrepreneurs in agriculture, so that they are enabled and capacitated to invest and be the billionaires that they can be when they are still in their 30s, in their 40s, and have a system of intergenerational linkage and movement and handover across different regions.
Yeah.
So that's what I can contribute.
Thank you. Ralph, do Caribbean youth find agriculture, aquaponics even sexy? I mean, I know a few years ago we tried some programs in St. Lucia and a couple other islands, and literally we had 4 or 5 youth show up, and then they did a canvas to find out, and people was like, that's not sexy for us anymore. I mean, why are you trying to put us into agriculture and these things? Is that what's the situation in the Caribbean and where you are in Trinidad? I mean, I know it's Tobago. Yeah.
The first of all, the average age of the farmer in the Caribbean is approaching 60 years old. So we are losing a generation of expertise, and it's a dangerous situation because, as you have all pointed out, I mean, the youth are not interested in toiling under the hot sun in the dirt. So we need to change the way we approach agriculture, and we as a private sector farming operation are very excited about bringing young men and women back to agriculture as a career. I do believe, from my own experience here, that young people are still very interested in the science of food production. So we're going to make it very sexy for them by inviting them to come and learn about advanced ag tech in our farm systems. It's a huge part of our social mandate. We're not going to wait for policy makers or government to do this. We're going direct to the technology schools. We're going to establish an advanced hydroponics training program and carry that on into farm management training and certification, which obviously we would like to recruit from. But what we want to do is give young people here the tools to learn about advanced agricultural technology so that they can work anywhere in the world. At the end of 2020, there were 55 billion square feet of greenhouses operating on the planet. One of the biggest issues with indoor farming is finding trained people to work there, to understand all of the different components of protected agriculture. So it's an amazing career opportunity for young people right now. So if we can do our small part to train young men and women in the islands where we operate, and hopefully they will come and get some experience working on our farm. Hopefully they will start their own farm, or hopefully they will find a career somewhere and be able to travel to somewhere in the world and experience protected agriculture and high advanced ag tech in other parts of the world. So yeah, we're huge supporters of the youth in agriculture.
Excellent. Let me pose one final question here from Sakib. His question is, how can we realize the situation to the concern? How can we start effective education from schools, from childhood? I assume he's talking about agricultural education. We've completely removed that from the curriculum in Belize, where I'm from. So we don't do any agriculture or anything anymore. And we import a lot of our vegetables now from outside when we can grow it. But I think there's a movement now to try to get back on stream. So
I'll make a quick point and let the others speak. But for us, we're going to bring all these young school children into our farm and see this is what farming is today, right? This is the kind of environment now that agriculture can be if you want to get into crop production. So I think for the most part, they're going to be very excited about it.
Excellent. So
I think for Kenya, the situation is very similar to Caribbean, but what we are doing now, we are changing our curriculum to what is called competency-based curriculum. And agriculture, nature conservation, environment management, even climate change is being introduced in the curriculum right at the primary level. So it is being presumed that as young people grow up to appreciate agriculture, then based on their respective competencies, they will fit into the system. But let me make a very important comment here. The youth are interested in agriculture if it makes money, if they can make money out of it. They only don't like the agriculture where if you are born in the rural area and you stayed in the rural area and you saw your parents carrying the hoe and going to the field, tilling from 6 a.m. up to midday, sweating, coming back, taking a little porridge, no money, no food from agriculture. But when it is agribusiness, then we are seeing many more young people getting engaged. In fact, agribusiness is now taught at college degree level in Kenya. And quite a number of young people are moving to agribusiness because there is money. People have to eat.
That's interesting. So you're suggesting that the approach needs to change and maybe the way it's captioned. Dr. Karja, let me come back to you for some final thoughts on our session today. What can Commonwealth government and stakeholders take away from the whole landscape of agriculture, agricultural production, and the effects of practices in the agricultural sector on air pollution?
I think the whole of the Commonwealth and other countries must give high priority to agricultural production, especially with a strong focus on agroecological production, where such production is sustainable, friendly to the environment, and can promote what we are now calling One Health for people, for the environment, for animals. That is one. Number two, there is need for targeted financing of actors, especially the youth, in the agribusiness sector, so that they have money to invest in the production and value addition. Number three, we need to create functioning markets across the Commonwealth so that food and agricultural products can be marketed easily across the regions, be it across Africa or North-South, South-South collaboration is important. And finally, we need to bring in strong focus on science so that even in the design of agricultural machinery, they should be environment friendly, they should be non-polluting, they should be designs that are easy to manage, easy to refurbish, recycle, and so on, so that the circular economy is anchored in agriculture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karja. Mr. Krishna, I want to come to you with a question on your final thoughts. can India lead this charge of creating functioning markets and making targeted financing available across the Commonwealth?
I had attended a conference in Nairobi about 2 years ago, and there was a very important comment made out there that, we need to have a partnership of equality. So I don't think we should be talking of leading. I think India would be very, very happy to partner. Now, there are different ways in which we can partner. I mentioned about sector skills council for green jobs, where we are already doing a lot of capacity building, right now in 29 African countries. Currently, the focus is on 7 sectors of solar. But we also have a sector skills council for agriculture. And, both Alice and Ralph made very valid point that the children just don't want to work like their parents. So we need to help as to how we can do training where without very expensive machinery, you can have a little more mechanization, you can have more productivity. Then the whole aspect of farm gate infrastructure for processing, the cold chain infrastructure. So there's so many jobs that can be created. We have created training modules for that. And as both the esteemed speakers have said, the pandemic has taught us a lot of things. So we have actually forced ourselves last year to go online. We have done 400,000 online trainings last year,
Wow.
Earlier we had 600 training institutions, but we did online, what to do. So we can do online. For solar, we've been doing online in Africa in English, French, and Spanish. So we'll be very happy to partner. It needs to be worked out. Maybe we can exchange some thoughts through mails, etc. But how could we bring in a deliverable? As far as finance is concerned, I know the government of India has credit lines, but I also mentioned in the context of Africa, there can also be the New Development Bank, where India is a part of the BRICS. So there are different ways that we apply, and climate finance. I think post-Glasgow, there'll be a lot of opportunities that will be emerging. So more than happy to partner.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna. Ralph, your final thoughts today?
Access to finance is probably one of the biggest hurdles for agricultural production in the Caribbean. National development banks were started on the back of agriculture. Right now, about 5% of their loan portfolio is in agriculture. We need to change that. Where I would love to see that change happen is through development banks like the World Bank and the UNDP, not provide token money for small micro projects necessarily, but use their ledger as a guarantee program for national development banks to start issuing loans to farmers and agri-processors. It's a huge opportunity for that. We need to get agriculture going here in the Caribbean. In all sectors of agriculture, we need to treat it as a business. We need to have financing and funding available that sees agriculture as a viable economic sector and lends to it like any other business.
Agreed. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank Dr. Alice Kadia, Mr. Krishna Kolluru, and Ralph Burkoff for joining us today in this, the third webinar on air pollution, this theme on agricultural air pollution. We have one final webinar on the 11th of March that will be on greening technologies and industries. And I would like to invite everyone to join us for that webinar ahead of our international high-level forum at the end of March on combating air pollution in Commonwealth countries. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I know we had a bit of technical difficulties at the end. That is due to my inept ability with any kind of technology. But we got it going after that. So thank you all very much. Do have a nice day. The sun is out, at least where I am in London. Maybe not where Anita is in London. But I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Thanks from the Ramphal Institute.
Thank you.
Good day, David.
All right.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.